current climate change pledges from world leaders will not be enough to keep global temperature targets, according to a new report from the United Nations. The organisation's Secretary-General has warned world leaders that the era of promises must end, saying closing the emissions gap must start in Glasgow. As world leaders come under even more pressure just a few days before COP26, can the summit be a success? Vicky, it has been described as a thundering wake-up call today that the world is heading towards climate catastrophe. Will world leaders pay attention ahead of that summit?
Well, they will, and I think we've been prepared for it. I mean, obviously, there was some hints that the report was going to suggest pretty bad news in terms of what has been achieved so far and what the various pledges will be achieving. And of course, it's a wake-up call. And Boris Johnson himself has been telling everyone not to expect perhaps too much, because that gap is enormous in the sense of what needs to be done extra if we are to get even near achieving the 1.5. It looks like on current projections, if we believe the figures that are coming out now, that we're going to be way above that. And what needs to happen is that efforts should be concentrated very much on what goes on between now and 2030. And what I find quite surprising, actually, is that despite the fact that both the UK, of course, and the EU seem to have quite ambitious plans that they have put together, which will be reducing carbon emissions very significantly from 1990 levels, with the EU, of course, pledging 55%, the UK pledging even higher figures by 2030 to 2035. Obviously, the big emitters, the US, China, and of course, up to a point also India, don't look like they're doing enough. I'm guessing that is why it looks so bad in terms of what the pledges are telling us.
Simon, the warning came that if there's no meaningful change, we will have lost forever the chance of achieving 1.5 Celsius and only 2.7 degree rises in temperatures this century. In practical terms, what would that mean? What would it look like?
It's a world we really don't want to find out about. Large areas of the Earth would have unlivable heat at parts of the year. We would see the kind of climate impacts we saw last summer of massive heat waves in Canada, of floods washing houses into the rivers in Germany, and people up to their necks in water on the subway system in China happening with great frequency. And for me, I think it's very hard to see how agriculture globally can adapt to that kind of level of change and keep food supplies going for what will at that point be 8 or 9 billion people on Earth. It would be a real catastrophe. And world leaders in these next 2 weeks really need to push hard to have practical policies to reduce emissions in the short term.
And Simon, we heard that warning from the Prime Minister yesterday that he's really worried. We've had Saudi Arabia's pledges, we've had Australia today, but the problem has been highlighted that many of those net zero goals remain vague. We haven't got the details of them, and much of the heavy lifting is pushed to after 2030. Is anything in Glasgow going to change that?
Well, I do think that these net zero pledges are important because they bring climate action 2 decades earlier, and that means that we then start talking about what is going to happen in the 2020s. And what to watch out for at this summit is the first 2 days when more than 120 world leaders will be in Glasgow making pledges and making announcements. And that's the time to look for potentially big announcements about what might happen over the next decade.